Have you ever been told that you can get rich quickly? That success can come overnight if you just take the right shortcut? Well, here's something to think about. What if that shortcut leads you to a place where you lose everything you ever had? And what if, all along, the real path to success was right under your feet? Slow, but sure. It's easy to want everything fast, but remember, not everything that looks good is actually good. Sometimes, rushing can cost you more than you can ever imagine. In a small, dusty village in Alka, West Africa, there were three young men, Chijioke, Nnamdi, and Emeka, who shared a bond stronger than any hardship that came their way. They grew up together, playing in the streets, dreaming of a life far beyond the poverty that surrounded them. Their parents were hardworking people, doing the best they could, but money was always scarce. They didn't have enough to eat, their clothes were threadbare, and their homes were basic, but they had each other and their dreams. Life in the village was hard, but it didn't stop them from dreaming big. They had seen men from the city who drove flashy cars and wore expensive clothes, and they wondered, what would it be like to live like that? They often sat together under the shade of a big tree, talking about their futures. We'll never have to worry about money if we find a way out of here, Emeka, the most ambitious of the group, would say with a confident grin. He was always the one who spoke of big plans, even when the world around them felt small. I don't want to work all my life and still be poor, Nnamdi would add, his voice filled with frustration. There's got to be a way to get rich quickly. Chijioke, however, was different. He didn't believe in shortcuts. We can work hard, get an education, and build something for ourselves, he would argue. That's how the wealthy people do it, through hard work and patience. But Emeka and Nnamdi laughed. Hard work won't get you anywhere, Chijioke. Emeka would tease. You need to be clever. You need to think big. Chijioke didn't know it at the time, but the day they all agreed on how to get out of their poverty-stricken lives would change everything. One evening, as they walked down the dusty streets, Nnamdi stopped in his tracks. I heard something today, he said quietly, his voice tinged with excitement. What? Emeka asked, curious. There's a way to get rich fast. It's called Yahoo, Nnamdi said, his eyes gleaming with intrigue. It's internet fraud, scamming people online. People make money from tricking others and they get rich quickly. Emeka's face lit up. Yahoo? I've heard about that. It's the perfect way out of here. Chijioke wasn't so sure. Are you sure it's the right thing to do? He asked, his tone serious. This doesn't sound right. But Emeka and Nnamdi were too excited to listen. Don't be a fool, Chijioke, Nnamdi said, slapping him on the back. If you want to get rich, this is the way. All we need to do is learn the tricks. Nnamdi and Emeka quickly became involved in Yahoo, learning everything they could about internet scams. They spent hours watching tutorials, reading guides on how to deceive people, and practicing their skills. At first, the money was small, just a few $100s here and there, but that was enough to excite them. They started to live the life they had always dreamed of. Nnamdi bought a second-hand car, an old model, but it was better than anything they had ever had. Emeka, on the other hand, went all out. He bought a flashy new car, one that turned heads wherever he went. They wore expensive clothes, went to clubs, and drank the best drinks. They were the kings of their small town. People started to take notice. Look at those boys, the villagers whispered. They've got money now. They must be doing something right. But Chijioke, who had refused to join them in their new venture, watched from the sidelines, troubled by the path his friends had chosen. He had stayed true to his original plan, learning a trade. He spent his days learning how to buy and sell goods. His hands were often sore from carrying boxes of clothes, shoes, and other items he would sell. It was hard work, but at least it was honest. While Emeka and Nnamdi enjoyed the fast life, throwing parties and surrounding themselves with beautiful women, Chijioke's life was filled with sweat and struggle. He tried to stay positive, praying every night for strength. But there were times when he felt disheartened. His friends mocked him, telling him he was wasting his time. "You're still stuck in that small shop?" Emeka would laugh. "You should be like us, living large, enjoying life. Why are you still wasting your time with this nonsense?" But Chijioke kept going. "I don't want to live my life like you guys," he would say softly. "I want to build something real, something I can be proud of." Emeka and Nnamdi's Yahoo business quickly expanded. They were making more money than they ever imagined. They bought bigger houses, fancier cars, and filled their homes with expensive things. But the more they had, the more they wanted. Their hunger for wealth became insatiable. One night, while at a club, they met a man named Chuka. He was older, mysterious, and knew everyone in the city. Chuka was known for his connections to the spiritual world, and when he heard about Emeka and Nnamdi's success, he saw an opportunity. "You've done well," Chuka said, sitting down beside them. "But if you want to go further, you need power. True power." "What do you mean?" Nnamdi asked, intrigued. Chuka smiled darkly. "There's a Baba, a man with great power. He can give you wealth beyond your wildest dreams, but you have to pay the price." Emeka's eyes sparkled with excitement. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Chuka leaned in, lowering his voice. "You'll need to perform certain rituals. You'll need to make sacrifices. But don't worry, if you follow the Baba's instructions, you'll be untouchable." At first, Nnamdi hesitated. He wasn't sure if they should go down this dark road. But Emeka was already sold. "This is the way, Nnamdi," he urged. "We've got to do this. We've come too far to stop now." They visited the Baba, an elderly man who lived on the outskirts of town, in a dark, secluded house filled with strange symbols and mysterious incense. The Baba was powerful, and he immediately recognized their desperation. "I can give you everything you want," the Baba said, his voice deep and hypnotic. "But you must follow my instructions precisely. There is a price to pay for this kind of power." Emeka and Nnamdi, desperate for more wealth, agreed. The Baba handed them a small charm and told them it would grant them untold riches. But with each charm they used, they needed to perform a ritual that required sacrifices. At first, the sacrifices were small. They had to make offerings of food, herbs, and sometimes personal items. But soon, the Baba told them they needed more. They needed a human sacrifice. The Baba's instructions grew darker and more demanding. He told Nnamdi and Emeka that in order to keep their wealth, they would need to sacrifice a young woman, a virgin, someone pure and innocent. The Baba assured them that this sacrifice would increase their wealth and power even further. Emeka was eager to comply. He had no qualms about using women to get what he wanted. He began luring women, university students who were seeking a better life in the city. He would take them out to expensive dinners, promising them a future of luxury and wealth. They would believe him, attracted to his flashy lifestyle and the promise of a better life. Nnamdi, on the other hand, felt uneasy. "This doesn't feel right," he would tell Emeka. "What if we get caught?" But Emeka was beyond reasoning. "No one will ever know," he would reply with a cold smile. "We're too smart for that. And the Baba has made us untouchable." They performed the rituals, taking these innocent women to remote locations and sacrificing them in the name of power and wealth. The money kept flowing in. They bought more cars, threw bigger parties, and surrounded themselves with more beautiful women. But with each sacrifice, they felt themselves becoming emptier. Their wealth no longer brought them joy. They became addicted to the power, and their actions grew darker. They were no longer the men they once were. One fateful night, after a particularly extravagant party, Emeka made a grave mistake. The Baba had warned them not to break certain rules during the rituals. He had told them not to sleep with women during certain days, especially when they were menstruating. But Emeka, drunk on his newfound power and wealth, ignored the warning. He slept with a woman who was on her period. The next morning, Emeka woke up feeling uneasy. His stomach churned, but he dismissed the feeling. He had everything he ever wanted: money, power, women, but it wasn't enough. He felt like something was missing. Later that night, Emeka got into his car to drive to meet friends. He was speeding down a familiar road, but something felt off. His head was spinning and his mind was clouded with guilt, but he ignored it and kept driving. As he rounded a sharp bend in the road, he lost control of the car. It crashed into a tree and Emeka was killed instantly. His body was mangled beyond recognition. Nnamdi was left in shock. He couldn't understand what had happened. It was as though the very power they had sought had turned against them. The price had been too high. And now, Emeka was gone. The day Emeka died was the day Nnamdi lost everything: the wealth, the power, the flashy cars, and the women. All of it felt hollow in the face of his friend's tragic death. Nnamdi didn't know how to process what had just happened. The man who had been his partner in crime, his brother in the pursuit of riches, was gone. The emptiness that followed was more than just the absence of a friend. It was the realization that the path they had taken had come with a terrible price. Nnamdi sat alone in his mansion, the walls of his opulent home closing in on him. He stared at the expensive furniture, the gold chains, the bottles of champagne. None of it felt like success anymore. The women he had once courted now seemed like distant memories. His mind replayed the words of the Baba. "Every charm I give you requires a price." He couldn't help but think that Emeka's death had been the price for their greed. But even now, Nnamdi couldn't bring himself to stop. There was too much money, too much power. He couldn't let go. As the days went on, Nnamdi became more isolated. His paranoia grew. He could no longer enjoy the luxury he had worked so hard to obtain. The walls of his mansion, filled with riches, now felt like a prison. The Baba had warned them, but it was too late. Emeka's sacrifice hadn't been enough to keep the dark forces at bay. Nnamdi had become a slave to the ritual. The hunger for more wealth continued to drive him deeper into the darkness. The Baba, sensing Nnamdi's desperation, visited him one fateful evening. The Baba had become a fixture in Nnamdi's life, appearing at the most critical moments, offering advice and reminding him that there was always a way to get more. The Baba's power seemed endless, and Nnamdi's addiction to wealth grew stronger. "You have gained much," the Baba said, looking around at the opulence in Nnamdi's home. "But now you want to be untouchable. You want to protect what you have gained." Nnamdi nodded. "I don't want to lose it," he said, his voice filled with an almost frantic urgency. "I'll do anything to keep it." The Baba smiled, his old wizened face full of secrets. "There is one final step," he said. "One more sacrifice." Nnamdi felt his heart race. He already knew the Baba's words. He had made human sacrifices before, but this was something else. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice shaking. "To keep your wealth, you need to take something even more valuable. You need to harvest organs. I can show you how. This is the only way you can maintain your power," the Baba explained, his voice cold and detached, as though discussing the most mundane of tasks. Nnamdi's world seemed to stop. He knew it was wrong, but his addiction to the wealth had clouded his judgment. His mind told him it was wrong, but his soul, tainted by the choices he had already made, didn't care. The hunger for more had consumed him. "You want more wealth," the Baba continued, "but you must do what's required." Nnamdi's eyes widened as he understood what the Baba meant. They were to harvest organs from the living, victims who would never be missed. The Baba assured Nnamdi that no one would ever find out. The victims would simply vanish. There were no consequences, only wealth. With the Baba's guidance, Namdi began to search for victims. It wasn't difficult to find them. There were always women looking for a way out of poverty, women who dreamed of a better life. Namdi used his wealth and influence to manipulate them, just as he had done with Emeka's victims. He promised them riches, a life of luxury beyond anything they had ever imagined. He took them to secluded locations, far from prying eyes. He assured them that this would be the start of a beautiful future, but instead, it was the beginning of their end. He lured one particular young woman, an ambitious university student named Ada, who was desperate to escape her circumstances. She was drawn to Namdi's charm, his promise of wealth, and the life he promised her. They dined at expensive restaurants, stayed in luxurious hotels, and she believed the lies he told her about the life they could share. Ada, like so many before her, trusted him. But once they were alone in a secluded house, Namdi's true intentions came to light. The ritual had begun. The charm he wore, the dark powers he had called upon, demanded their blood. Ada had no idea that she was the next victim in Namdi's quest for eternal power. She fought, screamed, but there was no escape. Namdi, now a hollow shell of the person he once was, performed the ritual, the one that would ensure he kept his wealth. The blood was spilled, the organs harvested, and Ada's body was discarded like trash. The blood on Namdi's hands was no longer a metaphor. It was real. He was no longer the man he once was. Meanwhile, Chijioke's life had taken a different turn. Despite the constant mockery from his friends, despite the hardships he faced in his small trade, he had stayed true to his values. He worked tirelessly at his market stall, selling goods honestly, no matter how little he earned. His hands were rough, his back sore from the long hours, but he never gave up. His boss, who ran the small clothing shop, was a cruel man. He sold fake goods to unsuspecting customers and mistreated his workers. Chijioke was often asked to lie, to sell counterfeit products, but he refused. "This isn't the way," he would tell his boss. "I won't lie to the people who trust me." His boss would laugh. "You'll never get anywhere with that attitude, Chijioke. The world isn't fair. If you want to survive, you need to stop being so honest." But Chijioke stayed the course, working long hours and praying for a breakthrough. He believed that his hard work would eventually pay off, and it did. One fateful day, a wealthy businessman came to the market. He bought several items from Chijioke's stall and, in the rush, left behind a large bag filled with dollars. Chijioke saw it and immediately made the decision to return it. He traveled to the businessman's house, unsure of how he would be received. The security guards at the gate stopped him. "Who are you?" they asked. "What do you want?" "I'm here to return something that belongs to your boss," Chijioke explained, holding up the bag. The guards were skeptical. "You? What do you think you're doing here?" But Chijioke didn't back down. He stood his ground. "I found this, and I must return it." Just as the situation was about to escalate, the businessman himself appeared. "What's this?" he asked, looking at Chijioke with surprise. "I found this bag," Chijioke said simply, holding it out. "It belongs to you." The businessman was stunned. "No one does that anymore," he said, a smile creeping onto his face. "You're a man of integrity. I respect that. Let me introduce you to some people who can help you." The businessman's friends, who were influential people in Nigeria, saw the honesty in Chijioke's actions and decided to help him. They gave him connections, helped him grow his business, and soon, Chijioke was a success. The shop that once seemed like a prison became a thriving enterprise. His honesty paid off, and his life transformed into the success he had always dreamed of. He built wealth, but it was honest wealth earned through hard work. One day, while Chijioke was managing his growing business, Namdi, now a shadow of his former self, walked down the street. He had heard rumors of Chijioke's success, of the way he had turned his life around. He found himself standing outside Chijoke's shop, staring at the man who had once been his friend. Chijoke saw him from the inside, standing by the window. There was no anger in his eyes, no judgment, just the quiet understanding that comes with seeing someone lost and broken. Chijoke walked outside and approached Namdi, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Namdi," Chijoke said softly, his voice gentle. "I see the regret in your eyes. I've been where you are, but it's never too late to change." Namdi's eyes filled with tears. "Chijoke, I was wrong. I mocked you, laughed at you, and now, look at me. I've lost everything. Emeka's dead. I'm lost. I don't even recognize myself anymore." Chijoke placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "It's never too late, Namdi. The road may be long, but you can still find your way back. You can choose a better life." Tears streamed down Namdi's face as he looked at the man who had always believed in the right path, even when the world told him it was the wrong one. "I'm sorry," Namdi whispered. "I should have listened to you." Chijoke smiled, his eyes full of compassion. "It's okay. What matters now is what you do next. You can make things right, the right way. You just have to believe in yourself." Namdi turned away, feeling a sense of peace for the first time in years. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that it was the only path worth taking. As he walked away from Chijoke's shop, he made a promise to himself, a promise to never again take shortcuts, to never again let greed control his life. 2 days before the fateful day he was supposed to return to the Baba for the sacrifice, Namdi sat alone in his dark mansion. The once grand house now felt like a prison, the walls echoing the emptiness inside him. His wealth, his mansions, his cars, his expensive watches and clothes didn't bring him joy anymore. The power he had so desperately sought now felt like a heavy burden. All he had gained, all he had done to get here, was slowly unraveling before his eyes. Namdi walked across his marble floors, each step echoing in the silence of the house. He remembered the people he had sacrificed, the young women whose lives he had taken to fuel his greed. Their faces haunted him. "How many more will I have to kill?" he thought, sitting down in his plush chair, running his fingers through his hair. The wealth had come too easily, and it had taken too much in return. He could feel his soul slipping away, and the realization of what he had become was too much to bear. Despite all the luxury, despite the wealth that surrounded him, he was still empty inside. He had everything, but he felt nothing. He had destroyed his own humanity to attain something that had no meaning. The laughs, the parties, the women, none of it filled the void. The Baba had told him he was bound by the rituals, that there was no turning back. "Come to the shrine in 3 days. You'll complete the sacrifice, and all will be well," the Baba had insisted. But now, Namdi felt the weight of that promise pressing down on him. Could he really go through with it? Could he keep sacrificing people to hold on to what he had? His mind was clouded with regret, but fear held him in place. He grabbed his phone, dialing the Baba's number. His hands trembled as he held the phone to his ear. "Baba," Namdi's voice was shaky. "I can't do this anymore. I don't want the wealth. I don't want this power. Please, I want to change." The Baba's voice came through the phone, cold and indifferent. "You think you can just walk away from this? You have made your choice, Namdi. You will come to the shrine in 3 days. Do not waste my time. You are already too deep in this to turn back." Namdi's heart sank. The Baba was not going to let him go so easily. He had made a pact, and there was no escaping it. But deep down, Namdi knew he could never escape the guilt that gnawed at him. He was trapped in a cycle of blood and greed, and no amount of money or power could ever undo what he had done. Namdi sat there, staring blankly at the floor. The weight of his actions, the lives he had destroyed, the sacrifices he had made to gain wealth, everything came crashing down on him. He had killed for money, for power, and now he had nothing left. His soul was empty. He was a shell of the man he once was, a man who had once believed in the idea of honest success. Now, all he could think about was the blood on his hands and the cost of the sacrifices. He remembered the Bible verses he had once heard as a child. What shall it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? And you cannot serve both God and Mammon. The words echoed in his mind, but it was too late. He had already sold his soul, but something inside him shifted. He couldn't keep living this way. He had to change. He had to make things right before it was too late. A plan began to form in his mind, a plan that could still redeem him, or so he hoped. He would complete the sacrifice, but after that, he would go to church. He would confess his sins, ask for forgiveness, and give his life to Christ. It was his last chance to save himself. The night before the sacrifice, Namdi's mind was racing. He couldn't sleep. His heart pounded in his chest as he thought about the ritual. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was wrong, that there was something deeper at play, something that even the Baba couldn't control. As dawn broke, Namdi made up his mind. He would go through with the sacrifice, but it would be the last time. After that, he would walk away from this dark path and seek redemption. He was already planning to go to church the following day, to confess everything, to throw away his wealth and his past, to live a life of honesty and integrity, no matter how difficult. He thought that maybe, just maybe, he could cheat fate and escape the consequences of his actions. But fate had other plans. At that moment, Namdi received a call. The name on the screen made his blood run cold. It was Chuka, the man who had introduced him to the Baba. "Namdi," Chuka said, his voice grim. "I have bad news. The Baba is dead. He passed away suddenly." Fear gripped Namdi's heart. "What do you mean he's dead? What happened?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I don't know. All I heard is that he was found dead in his shrine." Chuka replied, "It's strange, isn't it? You've been following his instructions for so long, and now he's gone. What happens to you now, Namdi?" Namdi hung up the phone, feeling his stomach drop. The Baba was dead. The man who had controlled his life, who had kept him bound to this dark path, was gone. Namdi felt a cold, hollow emptiness settle in his chest. He wasn't sure what this meant for him. What would happen now? Could he still go through with the sacrifice? With his heart pounding, Namdi got into his car and drove to the shrine, the place where he had given away so much of his soul. The streets passed by in a blur as he drove faster and faster, not sure whether he was trying to outrun his fear or the consequences of his actions. When he arrived at the shrine, something inside him snapped. He had been so close to redemption, so close to breaking free from the darkness, but now the fear of the unknown gripped him. He couldn't turn back. He didn't know what the Baba's death meant for him, but he had to know. He had to see it for himself. As Namdi stood in front of the shrine, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over him. He suddenly realized he couldn't go through with it. He couldn't sacrifice any more lives. The weight of his past decisions, the blood he had spilled, crushed him. He had been running away from the truth for so long, and now he was lost in the very darkness he had sought to control. His vision blurred and his body trembled as the madness overtook him. Fear, guilt, and regret crashed down on him all at once. His mind couldn't handle the weight of what he had done, and as the world around him spun out of control, Namdi collapsed to his knees. His sanity shattered. His mind broke under the pressure of his sins. He ran mad, screaming into the night as his life crumbled into chaos. While Namdi's world fell apart, Chijioke's world was quietly rising. He had kept his faith in honesty, and while the road was difficult, it was one that led to genuine success. His market stall, once a humble business, had blossomed into a thriving shop. The people who had once mocked him now came to him for advice. He had become a symbol of hard work and integrity in a world that often sought shortcuts. Chijioke's success wasn't without its challenges. As he began to make a name for himself, rumors started to spread on the streets. Some people whispered that his friends' wealth had not been earned honestly, and others wondered how he could have succeeded while they had fallen so far. One day, a woman who had been a friend of Emeka and Nnamdi came into Chijioke's store. She had heard the whispers about his friend's dark past. "Chijioke, how do you feel?" she asked, her voice full of pity. "You know, Emeka and Nnamdi's wealth wasn't clean. They did terrible things to get it." Chijioke's heart sank as he listened. He had heard the rumors too, but hearing them from someone who had known his friends made it feel more real. He thought about the path they had taken, the shortcuts they had chosen, and how it had led to their downfall. "I know," Chijioke said quietly, his voice filled with sorrow. "I know they chose a path that led them to destruction, but I chose a different road. I worked hard for what I have. I didn't take any shortcuts, and I'm proud of that." Despite the gossip, Chijioke's conscience remained clear. He had no regrets. His success was built on hard work and integrity, not stolen wealth. And while he mourned the loss of his friends, he knew that he had chosen the right path. He couldn't save them, but he had saved himself. In life, the road to success is not always easy, and it's certainly not always fast. Some people try to take shortcuts, to cheat the system, and to make quick gains. But as we've seen in the lives of Nnamdi and Emeka, shortcuts come with the heavy price. Their quest for power and wealth led them to destruction, while Chijioke's patience, honesty, and integrity led him to a future filled with purpose. The lesson is clear. There is no quick fix to success. Hard work, honesty, and persistence are the keys. Don't be fooled by the flashy allure of fast wealth. It may seem tempting, but it will always leave you empty in the end. Take the time to build something real, something you can be proud of, because in the end, all that glitters is not gold. Stay true to yourself. Stay true to your values. And remember, the greatest wealth is not found in money or power, but in a life lived with integrity and purpose. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more captivating tales like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, join us on this journey, and be the first to experience more powerful stories that inspire, teach, and entertain. Subscribe now.